So you might be hearing the term Swiftboating a lot lately and not know what it means. I didn't, so I looked it up. Swiftboating is defined as the targeting of a political or public figure with a contemptuous campaign of personal, unfair, or untrue attacks. And it's what the Trump-Vance campaign is currently trying to do to Democratic vice presidential candidate Tim Walz in regards to his military service. So let's take a second to break down Governor Tim Walz's military service and see where we stand. Tim Walz joined the National Guard at age 17, and he served in the American military for 24 years, first in Nebraska and then in Minnesota. He was deployed overseas in the Air National Guard to, among other places, the Arctic Circle in Norway, and to Italy in 2003 to backfill troops that were deploying to Afghanistan. Over the course of his career, he responded to many natural disasters in our country and others. A specialist in heavy artillery, Tim was responsible for training people on how to use an arsenal of weapons, and he has significant hearing loss from that time. In fact, Governor Walz had a number of unsuccessful surgeries to try and repair that hearing loss, and he could have retired with full benefits at 20 years of service, but he chose instead to re-enlist after 9/11. When Governor Walz was overseas, he served as a command sergeant major, but he retired as a master sergeant because his retirement came in before he had finished the final classes for the higher rank. He retired as a decorated NCO and disabled veteran. And as far as that retirement, according to the people who served with him, choosing to leave the Guard was a huge decision, and one he really struggled with, because Tim Walz loved the military, he loved the Guard, he loved the soldiers he worked beside. But he also had an opportunity to run for Congress. And if you know anything about politics, that opportunity doesn't come along every day. The stars really have to align, where the seat is available and you have the backers to support you. So he made the decision to leave in an attempt to help his fellow soldiers in a different way. Tim Walz retired 9 months after he put in the paperwork and 2 months before his platoon was notified they were going overseas. So this story we're hearing about stolen valor and having abandoned his unit before they were deployed to Iraq is a lie, started by the Republican vice presidential candidate, a man who spent 4 years in the Marines and should know better than to demean the service of a fellow veteran for political gain. And Tim Walz was a man of his word. When he won his district in Minnesota, he became the most senior enlisted soldier to ever serve in Congress. And he was elected to be the top Democrat of the Veterans Affairs Committee, where he made huge advances for veterans to best address their needs because he knew firsthand what they were dealing with. In fact, under Tim's leadership, Veterans Affairs got more attention than it had since the GI Bill was passed in World War II. As Nancy Pelosi herself said, Tim Walz has been a consistent, patriotic, and courageous American. So we can't just accept these lies that are being told about him. We have to stand up and we have to speak the truth. So let's be entirely clear. Not experiencing combat doesn't make you any less of a veteran. J.D. Vance should know that, as he didn't see combat either. But the fact that he is questioning the service of a man who spent 20 years more than he did in the military and just throwing around some of the worst charges you can lay on a fellow soldier is foul. So if you are hearing implications that Tim Walz dropped out of the military because he's some kind of coward, or is making up his rank, or is using stolen valor, please understand that you are being manipulated. That is a complete fabrication. And we know that because the timeline doesn't add up, and one man's actions speak far louder than another man's lies. Both men are on the ticket in some way because their service represents a missing piece from their candidate's resume. But while VP candidate Walz left the military to run for office so he could fight for the lives of his fellow soldiers and Americans from a different battlefield, VP candidate Vance left the military to be a venture capitalist and an empty vessel for the richest people in America to put all their terrible ideas into. So maybe JD and the people who support him should be careful about swift-boating someone and accusing them of only looking out for themselves. Because if we look at the evidence, one ticket does have a lot to be ashamed of. But it is certainly not the ticket with Master Sergeant Walz on it. Got it? Cool.